This is HOA Neighbor Court. It started with a parking warning and ended with a tow truck ambush. Karen slapped a bright red tow tag on my mirror and yelled that the tag was the warning and the truck was the consequence. I have witnesses, so do not lie to me. That was Janet Parker, election committee chair for the Park Pass Ridge Community Association in Richmond, Virginia, and she was standing in my driveway with a tow strap guy already hooking up my front wheels. The drizzle made everything slick and shiny, the pavement wet enough that I could see the amber flashers bouncing off the puddles. Janet had a clipboard in a clear plastic sleeve tucked under one arm and a bright orange violation sticker stuck to my windshield with no readable details, just the word violation in bold block print. My truck had not moved in 2 days. I was parked in my own driveway, legally, with my guest pass displayed on the dashboard exactly where the rules said it should be. But Janet did not care. She pointed at the sticker and said, "Smile. I am documenting this for the file," like she was doing me a favor. I felt my jaw tighten because my mother was inside the house recovering from surgery, and the last thing she needed was the sound of a tow truck beeping in reverse at 7 in the morning. I work as a municipal code researcher. I read ordinances for fun. I know what fire lanes look like, I know what guest parking rules say, and I know that the Park Pass Ridge covenants do not authorize election committee chairs to order tows from private driveways without board approval. Janet knew I knew that, which is why she was already yelling before I even got my shoes on. The tow guy was a contractor I had never seen before, no company logo on his vest, just a wheel lift truck with fresh scuff marks on the arm. He looked uncomfortable. Janet did not. She waved the clipboard at me and said, "I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes." I almost laughed, but my mother knocked on the window upstairs, and I saw her face, pale and worried, and the anger turned cold and focused. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Janet saw the phone and her smile went sharp. She said the guest pass was not displayed correctly, whatever that meant, and that she had received multiple complaints about my vehicle blocking the fire lane. My driveway is 15 feet from the curb. There is no fire lane within 50 yards of my house. I told her that. She told me to take it up with the board. The tow guy clicked the wheel clamp into place, and the sound was like a lock snapping shut. Janet treated it like a victory. She took a photo of my truck with the clamp on, another photo of the orange sticker, and then one of me standing there with my phone out. She said every frame would go in the file. I asked what file. She said the compliance file, the one that tracks violations and determines eligibility for amenities access. That was the first time I heard the threat clearly. Park Pass Ridge has a pool, a clubhouse, and a small gym. The amenities lockout threat was not in the covenants, but Janet had been pushing it in every board meeting for 6 months, testing how far she could go before someone pushed back. Most people in the neighborhood paid the fines and moved on because the hassle was not worth it. I was not most people. I asked Janet for the dispatch authorization. She said she did not need one. I asked her who approved the tow vendor contract. She said that was not my concern. I asked her if she was current on her own HOA dues. Her face went blank for half a second, just long enough for me to know I had hit something real. The tow guy said he needed a signature. Janet told him to get it from the board president, not from me. I said I was not signing anything, and I wanted a release receipt showing who authorized this. The guy looked at Janet. Janet looked at me. She said the receipt would be mailed within 10 business days, which we both knew meant never. I took a photo of his truck, his plates, the wheel clamp, and the strap configuration. Janet said that was harassment. I said it was documentation. She leaned in close, rain dripping off the brim of her clipboard sleeve, and said, "Smile. I am documenting this for the file." Second time. I made a note of that. Then she walked back to her car, a purple sedan with a Park Pass Ridge parking decal in the windshield, and drove off. The tow guy unhooked the clamp because I refused to move, and he did not want to deal with the police. He said Janet had called him directly, not through the HOA management company. He said she promised him $50 cash on top of the dispatch fee. He said he would not be back. I believed him. I went inside and checked on my mother. She was sitting up in bed, pale and shaky, asking what all the noise was about. I told her it was handled and that she did not need to worry. She said she heard yelling and thought someone was hurt. I made her tea and promised I would take care of it. But the truth was, the stress was making everything harder. She was supposed to be resting, recovering, not listening to HOA parking wars outside her window. That was the moment I decided I was not paying the fine, and I was not letting this go. I pulled up my email and started searching for every notice, every threat, every bogus violation Janet had sent me over the past year. There were 11. Expired guest pass, incorrect decal placement, vehicle blocking sight lines, trash cans visible from the street, unapproved exterior paint touch-up, and a string of others that made no sense. Every single one had come with a fee. Every single one had been dated after I voted against her candidate in the last board election. I opened a spreadsheet and started building a timeline. That afternoon, I got a call from the HOA management company. The woman on the line said my account was flagged for non-compliance and that my amenities access would be suspended pending payment of outstanding fines. I asked how much. She said $475. I asked for an itemized list. She said it was in the portal. I logged into the portal. The Wi-Fi was down. I tried my phone hotspot. The portal timed out. I called back. The woman said the system was under maintenance and I should try again tomorrow. I said I needed the list now because I was disputing the charges. She said disputes had to be submitted in writing within 30 days of the notice date. I said the notices were backdated and I could prove it. She hung up. I called my city clerk contact, a guy named Morris, who had helped me pull permits for a deck project 2 years ago. Morris was the kind of person who loved paperwork and hated bullies. I told him what was happening. He said the city does not regulate HOA towing on private property. But if Janet was claiming fire lane violations, the fire marshal might want to see her documentation. He gave me the fire marshal's direct line and told me to mention his name. I called the fire marshal. I explained the situation. The fire marshal said he would send an inspector out within 48 hours to verify the fire lane claim. He said if there was no legitimate violation, the HOA could not use fire safety as a pretext for enforcement. He said I should document everything and be ready to provide photos and timestamps. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called Morris back and asked if HOA election records were public. He said they were not automatically public, but if there was evidence of fraud or improper proxy handling, the state attorney general could request an audit. He said I would need hard proof, not just suspicion. I said I was working on it. He said to keep him in the loop. I felt the first flicker of control coming back. Janet thought she could bury me in paperwork and fees. She did not know I had spent the last decade digging through municipal codes and learning how to make bureaucracy work for me instead of against me. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA drama and satisfying payback. That night I went through my security camera footage. I have 2 cameras, one covering the driveway and one covering the street. The driveway camera caught Janet pulling up at 6:53 in the morning, getting out with the clipboard, taking photos of my truck, and then making a phone call. 4 minutes later, the tow truck arrived. The street camera caught her walking up to my truck and slapping the orange sticker on the windshield herself. No vendor involved, no board authorization visible. I downloaded both clips and backed them up to 3 different drives. Then I pulled the metadata. The timestamp, the GPS coordinates, the file size, everything that would prove the video was unedited and authentic. That was my trump card. I was not going to reveal it yet. I let the meeting move on. Because my move was not a speech, it was a document. I needed the right moment, the right audience, and the right consequences lined up so Janet could not wriggle out of it. The next morning I got another notice. This one was taped to my mailbox. It said my vehicle decal was expired and that I had 72 hours to replace it or face another tow. I checked my decal. It was valid through the end of the year. I took a photo of the decal, a photo of the notice, and another photo of the mailbox cluster with the notice still taped to it. Then I called the management company again. This time I got a different person, a man who sounded tired and overworked. I explained the decal situation. He said he would make a note in my file. I asked if he could confirm who submitted the violation report. He said it came from the election committee. I asked if the election committee had enforcement authority. He paused. He said he would check and call me back. He never called back. I sent an email to the board president with photos of the decal, the notice, and a request for clarification on the enforcement process. The board president replied 3 days later with a 2-sentence email saying all violations were handled by the compliance officer and that I should direct my questions to Janet Parker. I replied asking if Janet was the compliance officer. No response. I started asking around the neighborhood. I found out I was not the only one getting hit with bogus notices. A delivery driver had blocked a lane for 30 seconds 2 weeks ago, and Janet had used it to launch a neighborhood-wide crackdown on guest parking. She was sending vendors to people's doors without notice to verify compliance and provoke confrontations. 3 neighbors had been fined for expired guest passes, even though their guests had left hours before the notices were posted. One guy got a bill for $200 because his contractor parked in the street during a roof repair. Another woman got threatened with a lien because her guests did not display the pass on the dashboard correctly, even though the rules did not specify a correct orientation. Every single notice had come from Janet. Every single fine had been processed without board review. And every single payment had been deposited into an account that was not listed on the HOA financials. I found that out from a neighbor who worked in banking and got curious after her own fine. She pulled the deposit records and saw the account name did not match the HOA corporate entity. She shared a screenshot with me. I added it to my file. That was when the side complication hit. I needed the rest of my proof from the HOA portal, but the portal Wi-Fi was still down. I drove to the clubhouse to use the hardwired connection in the office. The door was locked. There was a sign taped to the glass that said amenities access suspended for accounts with outstanding violations. No name, but I knew it was aimed at me. I called Morris again. He said if the HOA was locking me out of public records, I might have legal grounds for a records access complaint. He said it would take weeks to process. I said I did not have weeks. He said I could try showing up at the next board meeting and demanding the records in person. I said the meeting was not for another 10 days. He said sometimes pressure works faster than paperwork. I thanked him and started planning what I would say. The fire marshal inspector showed up 2 days later. He walked my driveway, measured the distances, checked the street, and took photos. He said there was no fire lane within 100 yards of my property and no code violation of any kind. He said if the HOA claimed otherwise, they were either mistaken or lying. He gave me a signed letter stating his findings and said I could use it in any dispute. I made 5 copies. 1 for me, 1 for Morris, 1 for the board president, 1 for the management company, and 1 to hold in reserve. Then I went to the county clerk's office and pulled the tow dispatch logs. Virginia law requires all tow companies operating under contract with a municipality or HOA to file dispatch records with the county. I found the entry for my truck. The dispatch was logged under Janet Parker's personal cell phone number, not the HOA management company. The fee was listed as $75 plus a $50 cash tip. The receiving account was the same one my banking neighbor had flagged. I got a certified copy of the log and added it to my file. That weekend, Janet tried again. I was pulling into my driveway when I saw the tow truck backing in. Different truck, same wheel lift setup. I got out and blocked the driveway with my body. The driver got out and said he had an authorization from the HOA compliance officer. I said, "Show me." He handed me a printed email. It was from Janet's personal email address, not the HOA domain. It said my vehicle was parked illegally and needed to be removed immediately. I took a photo of the email. Then I called the police non-emergency line. The dispatcher said an officer would be out within 20 minutes. The tow driver said he was not waiting. I said if he hooked up my truck without a legal authorization, I would file a theft report and he would lose his contractor license. He looked at the email again. He looked at me. He got back in his truck and left. Janet pulled up 30 seconds later. She saw the tow truck leaving and started screaming. She said I was interfering with HOA enforcement. I said she was attempting an illegal tow. She said she had documentation and authority. I said I had a city fire marshal letter and tow dispatch logs proving she was acting without board approval. Her face went white. She said I was making false accusations. I said I had video evidence and I was prepared to present it at the board meeting. That was the moment she panicked. She demanded to see the proof right then. I said no. She said she would have me removed from the property. I said this was my property. She said the HOA had enforcement rights. I said not without due process. She started taking photos of me with her phone, saying, "Smile, I am documenting this for the file." Third time. I said every photo she took was going into my case file too. She got back in her car and drove off so fast her tires squealed on the wet pavement. The police officer arrived 10 minutes later. I explained the situation and handed him a clean packet with the fire marshal letter, the tow dispatch log, and a timeline of Janet's violations. He took notes and gave me an incident report number. He said if there was another tow attempt, I should call immediately and reference the report. I thanked him and went inside. My mother was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, looking exhausted. She asked if it was over. I said not yet, but soon. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. I spent the week organizing my evidence into a presentation. Timeline, photos, videos, dispatch logs, fire marshal letter, account records, and a list of every neighbor who had been wrongly fined under Janet's enforcement regime. I reached out to a city clerk who explained which documents were public record and how to request a formal audit if the board refused to act. Morris helped me draft a complaint letter to the state HOA ombudsman, citing improper financial handling and election interference. I also contacted an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. She said I had a strong case for harassment, improper fines, and possible fraud. She said if I wanted to go legal, she could file within a week. I said I wanted to try the board meeting first and give them a chance to fix it. She said to call her if it did not work out. I paid her a consultation fee and added her contact info to my file. 3 days before the meeting, Janet sent out an email blast to the entire neighborhood. It said there was a rogue homeowner threatening the association with frivolous legal action and that the board was taking steps to protect the community. It said my name. It said I was refusing to pay legitimate fines and interfering with compliance enforcement. It said I was creating a hostile environment for volunteers. I forwarded the email to the attorney. She said it was defamation and I could add it to the case. I forwarded it to Morris. He said it was evidence of retaliation. I printed it and added it to my packet. Then I sent a reply-all email with one sentence. I have documentation proving the violations were falsified, and I will present it at the meeting Thursday. Janet sent another email within 5 minutes saying my claims were baseless and irresponsible. I did not reply. I let the silence do the work. Thursday came. The meeting was at the clubhouse. I arrived early with my packet in a folder and a USB drive with the video files. Morris showed up as my witness. The board president, a man named Tom who looked like he had not slept in a week, opened the meeting with the standard agenda. Janet was sitting in the front row with her clipboard and a stack of binders. She was wearing her pink jacket and her black baseball cap. She looked calm, but her hands were tight on the clipboard. When the agenda got to homeowner comments, I stood up. Tom looked at me and sighed. I said I was there to dispute multiple violations and present evidence of improper enforcement. Janet stood up immediately and said my comments were out of order because I had outstanding fines. Tom said homeowner comments were allowed regardless of account status. Janet sat down. I handed Tom a copy of my packet. I handed another copy to the board secretary. I handed a third copy to Morris. Then I started walking through the timeline. I showed the fire marshal letter, proving there was no fire lane violation. I showed the tow dispatch log, proving Janet had used her personal phone and a non-HOA account. I showed the screenshots of the backdated notices. I showed the decal that was still valid. I showed the email where Janet called me a rogue homeowner. Tom looked at the packet. He looked at Janet. He asked if she wanted to respond. Janet said the documents were taken out of context and that I was twisting the facts. I said I had video evidence. Janet said I was bluffing. I pulled out the USB drive and asked if the clubhouse projector was available. Tom said it was. Janet said the video was irrelevant. I said it showed her placing the violation sticker herself without vendor authorization. The room went quiet. Tom plugged in the USB drive. The video played on the screen. 6:53 in the morning. Janet's car. Janet walking up to my truck. Janet slapping the sticker on the windshield. Janet making a phone call. The tow truck arriving 4 minutes later. The timestamp was visible. The metadata was visible. The angle was clear. There was no ambiguity. Janet stood up and said the video was doctored. I handed Tom the metadata report. I handed him the certified tow dispatch log. I handed him the fire marshal letter. I handed him the account screenshots showing the non-HOA deposit account. Then I said I had contacted an attorney and the state HOA ombudsman, and that I was prepared to file a formal complaint if the board did not take immediate action. Tom looked at the board secretary. The board secretary looked at Janet. Janet said I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes. Someone in the back of the room laughed. Morris stood up and said he could confirm the fire marshal findings, and that the city had no record of any code violations at my address. Another neighbor stood up and said she had been fined for the same guest pass issue and wanted a refund. Another neighbor said his contractor bill was bogus. Another said Janet had threatened him with a lien. Tom raised his hand and said the board would take a 15-minute recess to review the documents. During the recess, Janet tried to corner me in the hallway. She said I was destroying the community, and that people like me were the reason HOAs had to have strict enforcement. I said people like her were the reason HOAs got sued. She said she had every right to enforce the rules. I said she did not have the right to fabricate violations and pocket the fees. She said that was a lie. I said it was in the dispatch log and the account records. She said I had no authority to access those records. I said Virginia public records law gave me every right. She started to say something else, but Morris stepped between us and said the recess was over. We went back inside. Tom was standing at the front of the room with the packet in his hands. He said the board had reviewed the evidence and determined that the violations in question were improperly issued. He said the fines would be reversed and my amenities access would be restored. He said the board would be conducting an internal audit of all compliance actions taken over the past 12 months. He said Janet would be stepping down from the election committee pending the results of the audit. Janet stood up and said the board had no authority to remove her. Tom said the bylaws allowed the board to suspend any committee chair for cause, and that falsifying violations was cause. Janet said she would fight it. Tom said she was welcome to try. That was not the end. The showdown happened 2 days later. I was filling up gas at a station just outside the subdivision when Janet pulled in. She parked next to my truck and got out. She had her phone in her hand, recording. She said I had ruined her reputation, and that she was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of person I was. I said everyone already knew what kind of person she was. She said I had fabricated evidence and bribed the fire marshal. I said that was defamation, and I was adding it to the complaint. She stepped closer and said, "Smile. I am documenting this for the file." 4th time. I said I had been documenting her for 6 months, and the file was already with the attorney. She said I was bluffing. I pulled out my phone and called the attorney on speaker. The attorney answered and asked if I needed her to file the complaint. I said yes. The attorney said she would have it submitted by end of business. Janet's face went gray. She said I was making a mistake. I said the only mistake was hers, and it was on video, in dispatch logs, and in account records that the state ombudsman was about to review. A city inspector happened to be parked across the lot, finishing his lunch. He saw the confrontation and walked over. He asked if there was a problem. I explained the situation. Janet said I was harassing her. The inspector asked to see identification. Janet fumbled for her wallet. I handed the inspector the incident report number from the police officer 2 weeks ago. The inspector radioed dispatch and confirmed the report. He asked Janet if she was the compliance officer for Park Pass Ridge. She said yes. He asked if she had filed any fire lane violations in the past 6 months. She said she had filed multiple violations based on resident complaints. He asked if she had verified the complaints with the fire marshal. She did not answer. He said confirming what the HOA cannot enforce was a city matter, and that filing false safety violations was a misdemeanor. He said if the state audit found evidence of intentional fraud, the city would pursue charges. Janet got in her car and left without another word. The inspector gave me his card and said to call if there were any more issues. I thanked him and drove home. The state audit took 6 weeks. The results came back in a 14-page report. The auditor found that Janet had issued over 200 improper violations across the neighborhood over an 18-month period. She had collected more than $30,000 in fees that were never reported to the board or deposited into the HOA operating account. She had manipulated proxy ballots in the last election to install a board member who would not question her enforcement practices. She had threatened multiple homeowners with liens and amenities lockouts without board authorization. The report recommended immediate termination of the vendor relationship tied to the abuse, reversal of all fines issued under her authority, and a formal complaint to the state attorney general for possible criminal charges. The board voted unanimously to accept the recommendations. Janet resigned from the HOA the next day. The management company terminated her access to the portal and the compliance files. The board issued refund checks to every homeowner who had been wrongly fined. My check was $475. My neighbor who worked in banking got $300. The guy with the contractor bill got $200. In total, the HOA refunded more than $18,000. The new compliance officer was a retired teacher who actually read the covenants before issuing a notice. The board amended the enforcement policy to require dual authorization for any tow or lien action. They also added a dispute process with a 30-day appeal window and mandatory documentation review. The neighborhood group chat, which had been silent for months, started buzzing with relief and a little bit of celebration. People were sharing their refund amounts and comparing notes on Janet's tactics. One person called it the Great Park Pass Purge. Another said it was the first time in years they felt like the HOA worked for them instead of against them. I did not say much. I just posted a thank you to Morris and the fire marshal inspector and said I was glad it was over. My mother asked if I was going to keep fighting. I said there was nothing left to fight. The system had worked, slowly and painfully, but it had worked. She said she was proud of me. I said I was just tired. Janet's complaint was ruled unfounded with evidence cited in the state audit report. The vendor relationship tied to the abuse was canceled by the board, and the towing company lost its contract with Park Pass Ridge. The entire enforcement regime she had built collapsed in less than 2 months. The twist that really sealed it was discovering she was not even current on her own dues while lecturing everyone else. The accounting review found she owed more than $800 in back dues and late fees that she had waived for herself in the system. The board sent her a final notice and filed a lien on her property. She sold her house 3 months later and moved out of the neighborhood. I never saw her again. Morris said the state attorney general was still reviewing the file for possible fraud charges, but I did not follow up. I had what I needed. My mother finished her recovery. The stress lifted. The driveway stayed quiet. No more tow trucks, no more orange stickers, no more clipboard confrontations in the rain. I still see the bright orange violation stickers sometimes in my mind. That flat, bold print with no details. just the word violation like a scarlet letter. But now when I see one in real life somewhere else, I think about how easy it is for someone with a clipboard and a little bit of authority to make your life hell, and how hard it is to fight back when the system is rigged, and the rules are vague, and the people in charge do not care. I think about how close I came to just paying the fines and letting it go because the hassle was not worth it. I think about how many people in the neighborhood did exactly that, month after month, because they did not have the time or the knowledge or the fight left in them. And I think about how one video file, one dispatch log, one fire marshal letter, and one neighbor willing to show up as a witness can change everything. It does not always work, but sometimes it does. And that has to be enough. I hope your mailbox cluster stays quiet,